Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Thursday, January 7th, 2016, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's what's coming up tonight.
Tonight, a German broadcaster apologizes for being silent on a rash of sexual assaults. Then, 75 times Obama has broken laws in office. After that, released transcripts tell of Gaddafi warning Tony Blair of a migrant influx. And the latest airport horror stories. That's next.
We've got to have the TSA stick the hands down the pants, because somebody might go on here and might blow up an airplane. And so we got to do it to 6-year-olds. We got to do it to pop stars. We got to do it to Miss America. Our hands are going in your pants. And if you don't want our hands down your pants, go through the scanner. Oh, but by the way, when we put you through the scanner, we also go hands down the pants. Oh, that's been announced. That's what they do. They do both. They admit they want to do all of it to everybody. Everyone scanned, everyone hand down the pants. They're
clean, pure drinking water. You can't survive without it. But where do you get it? Alexa Pure Pro is a brand new, groundbreaking, gravity-fed water filtration system that is like no other. The Alexa Pure Pro transforms water from virtually any fresh source into clean, healthy drinking water, pairing the unprecedented superfiltration power of an all-new gravity block core with a hybrid chromatic shell. It removes up to 99.999% of impurities, including bacteria, viruses, fluoride, disinfectants, volatile organic contaminants, and hormones. Filter capacity up to 5,000 gallons. Stainless steel construction, easy assembly, low maintenance. Replacement filters are simple to install. And now, as part of an exclusive limited time introductory offer, you can save $20 off the retail price and get free shipping. This is a limited time offer, so order your unit today and receive free shipping and $20 off. Go to InfoWarsStore.com or call 888-253-3139.
People have been calling for President Obama's impeachment for years, but could that finally be coming to fruition? Now there are reports circulating online that suggest that the Republican National Committee is about to consider a resolution drafted for the impeachment of President Barack Obama.
Calls for President Obama's impeachment have circulated for years, but he's finally gone too far. Steve Watson reports, RNC will consider Obama impeachment proceedings. A document titled Articles of Impeachment of Barack Hussein Obama consists of 48 criminal charges and is set to be weighed up at a January 13th meeting of the RNC. The resolution cites Obama's malfeasance, misconduct, and abuse of the Oval Office and includes the IRS targeting of conservative organizations and bypassing Congress with the use of executive action on key issues. Article 3 of the resolution states that Obama has been aiding and abetting known enemies of the United States, including the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and the Taliban, among others. The committeeman behind the resolution says that we are a nation of laws and separation of powers, and this lets the president know that we are not going to put up with his ability to go around the Constitution.
So they impeached Clinton for getting sexual favors and lying about it under oath. But we can't seem to impeach Obama for breaking federal laws seemingly on the daily. Now, we've done it before. Can we do it again? Now, here is an extensive list of Obama's crimes showing why Congress must impeach him now. Kit Daniels has more. He's going to give you just a few of the 75 times Obama broke the law during his presidency.
President Barack Obama is simply a monopoly man who's no different than John D. Rockefeller and Cecil Rhodes. But instead of having a monopoly on the diamond trade, President Obama wants a monopoly on power in the initiation of force, which is the very definition of government. It was the 18th century political philosopher Montesquieu who said, quote, "There can be no liberty when the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or body of magistrates." But this is exactly what President Obama is doing right now and should concern every citizen. I mean, he has a consistent pattern of lawlessness, eagerness to disregard the law, unilateral action to circumvent Congress, like he's doing recently with the gun control executive action. He's just really pushing this bold acceleration towards tyranny and is simply engaged in sedition against the country with his suspending, delaying, waiving portion of laws like Obamacare, for example, that, he's in charge to enforce, not to rewrite laws. But that's exactly what he's doing. He's simply rewriting laws. And dictatorships are often characterized by an abundance of laws. But, in Obama's case, abundance of executive actions. But we're a nation of law, not men. So, and according to the Constitution, nobody, especially not Obama, is above the law. Like I said just now, we are a nation of law, not men. I mean, let's break it down. For example, he's with Operation Fast and Furious, which started in 2009. He was arming Mexican drug cartels in order to blame the Second Amendment later on. And not even that, but also he has been arming ISIS militants. He's been saying that he is arming militants in Syria, rebels against the Syrian government. But what he's not telling you is that the majority of Syrian rebels since at least 2013 has been affiliated with ISIS. And they've even admitted this to various reporters that have been in the area in Syria reporting on the civil war that's been going on for so many years. I mean, it's so ridiculous that you have a sitting president here that's openly funding and arming ISIS militants that are chopping off Christians' heads off and destroying, these areas in Syria, that these ancient Roman structures that have been around for 2,000 years. They're just, bulldozing it down, putting in Sharia law. I mean, Syria is a place that since the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, like past 2,000 years, that Christians and Muslims have lived in peace. And yet now we have Obama, who is literally putting in a proxy army with the taxpayer money to behead Christians and completely destroy the country. And it's a complete mess. And it's completely ridiculous. But that's not the only thing he's done that's been outside of law. But let's go back down on the list. He's also attempted to shut down gun stores outside of law with this program called Operation Choke Point, in which the Justice Department was pressuring banks to refuse service to gun stores. Now, down to here in Austin, we have a local gun shop called Central Texas Gun Works, which is owned by Michael Cargill, a long-term guest on the Alex Jones show. And he was one of the first people to tell me about this program, which I broke, which ended up on the Drudge Report, about how the Justice Department and it was a couple other agencies were going to these banks and saying, these are gun stores high risk. It's no different than a loan shark company. So, they were basically overloading the banks with loans, with all this paperwork and loan paperwork and credit paperwork and whatnot, all these regulations that they had to do extra in order to conduct business with gun stores. So, and this is of course planned by design by the Justice Department, that the banks were not going to be willing to do that just for certain businesses. So we're like, no, we're not going to do that at all. So now you see all these gun shops that were completely having to close shop because they didn't have a bank that they could conduct their transactions with any longer. And that is simply a classic example of criminal racketeering by the Obama administration. And also, let's not forget that President Obama has practically opened the borders to allow thousands of illegal aliens, not just from Mexico, but not just from Latin America, but from all over the world to flood into the United States. Now, he's, for example, the Border Patrol was caught buying bus tickets for illegal aliens to ship them deeper in the country. And I'm not trying to throw the Border Patrol under the bus. I'm not saying a lot of this was due to Obama telling them what to do. But what you had was the Border Patrol was detaining illegals after they crossed the border, but then they were detaining them for several weeks in detention facilities, all over the Southwest United States. But then they were buying these illegals bus tickets to literally go wherever they wanted to go into the country. If they had family in Minneapolis, for example, taxpayers were paying money to complete the importation, the smuggling process of illegal aliens, taking them from McAllen, Texas, for example, all the way to Minneapolis or Detroit. And this is by design. President Obama even told the Border Patrol back in 2013 that they needed to back off enforcing immigration laws. I mean, I was down there like 2 years ago on the border, and I saw more Texas state troopers on the border than I saw Border Patrol agents. I mean, this is a complete stand down of the border, and it's by design to destroy the country and to eradicate national sovereignty. I mean, we had a vice president of the National Border Patrol Council told Breitbart that we are simply being ordered to stand down and stop tracking and trying to apprehend the criminals. And the sad part about this is a lot of people don't realize is that human trafficking is a huge business globally. It's $1 billion business. We have more slaves now in the world than we did during the Civil War, during the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, during the Spanish Empire, during the English Empire. Right now, there is more people that are enslaved than any time in human history. And the sickening part of this is that people are being paid $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 to smuggle illegal aliens into the country, and then these illegal aliens end up working in sex shops, massage parlors. You go on Craigslist in any city and you'll see all sorts of massage parlor. They're all staffed, almost all of them are staffed by illegal aliens that were smuggled into the country, and these people are being paid below minimum wage. And it's just really sad how all these people are just being enslaved, all thanks to President Obama for not enforcing law as he's supposed to do under the Constitution, but rather doing his own way. Saying I don't like that law, so I'm not going to enforce it at law. In fact, I'm going to pretend that law doesn't exist. And that's exactly what he did with the Border Patrol. For one thing, once you go down into Mexico on the border, there's literally hundreds and thousands of warehouses that are full with illegal aliens that are ready to cross into the country. And these the warehouses are not air conditioned. They're complete hot, humid, hundreds of people piled up. They're literally modern day equivalents of slave ships. So what we really see now is President Obama, by violating the Constitution to open the borders, he is now the global slave master. That's leading $1 billion slave industry across the world. And here's another one of Obama's crimes. He is using his so-called pen in his phone to write an executive action to enact gun control outside of law and outside of Congress. Zero Hedge reported, quote, "Without a Democratic majority in Congress and faced with a GOP that is firmly against any form of gun control measures, Obama has repeatedly warned that he would act on his own." And here's something else that President Obama is doing that violates the Constitution. He's trying to use executive action to prevent people that are on the government's no-fly list from buying a gun. Now, I'm sure the media spins that as sounding like a great idea, like, oh, well, they're on the no-fly list. Why should they be able to buy a gun? But here's what they're not telling you. The no-fly list is a clear violation of the Fifth Amendment and a clear violation of people's due process because, frankly speaking, the government can put anybody on the no-fly list. It can say that, that person's suspicious, we suspect them of being involved in some terrorist activity, so we're going to put them on the no-fly list. And there's really no way for someone who's been erroneously placed on the no-fly list, and there's thousands of people that have been erroneously placed on the no-fly list, for being able to appeal the process. They're just basically stuck there for years. There was this one example of this lady who was like a college student, and she was put on the no-fly list because her name was, I think, sounded similar to someone else's name. She was on the no-fly list for 10 years until finally the ACLU was able to lobby on her behalf to get her off the list. So basically speaking, this whole no-fly list is just a way for President Obama to put whoever he wants on the list and restrict their Second Amendment rights outside of law, outside of due process. This is exactly what you expect a dictator of a third world country to do. And if I was to go over the 75 crimes that Obama's committed that I know of, I'd be in front of a camera for 2-3 hours. So you can go on Infowars.com and look at the article yourself. 75 times Obama has broke law during his presidency. And just, go through it yourself, share that article, get it out to everybody you know. Because this is a big deal when you have a president who is openly acting like a dictator. And I know it sounds like right-wing rhetoric to call Obama a dictator, but he really is acting like a dictator. He's establishing an imperial presidency. And just think that someone, God forbid, that's worse than Obama gets into office. Obama is setting a precedent for him to be able to just enact martial law or whatever he wants to do. Because now we don't really even have a country anymore. We just have a dictatorship. We don't have a country that's constitutional republic. We have a third world banana republic. Once again, this is Kit Daniels with Infowars.com.
Well, if voters needed one more red flag to underscore the fact that Hillary Clinton is totally incompetent, there's some news coming out today that should, help justify that. Now, obviously, the State Department under Clinton is largely responsible for the power vacuum there with taking Gaddafi out in Libya, which has, of course, led to this rise in terrorist activity, which has spread to the West.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
So Clinton, as well as British Prime Minister Tony Blair, were warned by Gaddafi himself. He actually issued a prophetic warning to Tony Blair that jihadists would attack Europe if his regime was allowed to collapse. Now, these are according to phone conversations between the two that have just been revealed today. Now, Gaddafi's dire prediction was made in two desperate telephone calls on February 25th, 2011, as a civil war was engulfing Libya. In the first phone call, Gaddafi said, "They want to control the Mediterranean, and then they will attack Europe." He insisted that he was trying to defend Libya from al-Qaeda fighters. Gaddafi said, "We are not fighting them. They are attacking us. I want to tell you the truth. It is not a difficult situation at all. The story is simply this. An organization has laid down sleeping cells in North Africa called al-Qaeda organization in North Africa. The sleeping cells in Libya are similar to dormant cells in America before 9/11. And in a second call he made just over 4 hours later, he said that he was going to have to arm the people and get ready for a fight. Libyan people will die. Damage will be on the Med, Europe, and the whole world. These armed groups are using the situation as a justification, and we shall fight them. So Gaddafi, even in these phone calls, he said, please invite the journalists in. They can report on this, so you'll know that this is the truth that I'm speaking. This is the situation. And of course, 3 weeks later, a NATO-led coalition began bombing raids that led to the overthrow of Gaddafi, and this dictator was finally deposed in August and murdered by a mob in October. Now, Mr. Blair had actually developed a friendship with Gaddafi, and he cleared these phone calls with David Cameron and Hillary Clinton, and he was attempting to persuade Gaddafi to leave Libya and give him some safe passage to avoid further conflict. Obviously, we all know what the outcome was of that. Now, stick around because we are going to be talking about the raping of Europe's women and how some people are fighting back.
Shane Steiner's involvement with InfoWarsLife.com truly happened in an organic way. I went to high school with Shane, his brother, knew his parents well, and he was visiting the office once, hadn't been to the office in years, and said, wow, I notice you're making and selling supplements. Do these really work? Because I've tried a lot of supplements as a workout enthusiast, and I really think most of them are hype. And I said, here, take some home, try it. Well, a few weeks later, he came in blown away and said, I want to buy 3 boxes of this stuff to give my friends and family. It's simply amazing. He said, why does it work so well? And I said, listen, go to InfoWarsLife.com, watch the informational videos with Dr. Group and others. They understand how it all works. I know that it works for me. That's all I understand. The science, the facts, the research, people's testimonials, they're all on InfoWarsLife.com. You can check it out for yourself.
I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to push myself and work out harder, and that led to me being able to come out and do stuff like the barefooting and the surfing and stuff like that, which I've never done. I never would have done that 2 years ago.
Shane has said over and over again, more than just libido and energy, it made him want to get into the gym more. It made him want to get in better shape. And believe me, the Steiners have amazing genetics. His brother is a world champion steer wrestler. His dad, Bobby Steiner, is a famous world champion bull rider. They've got natural genetics. But when you added this to the mix, in Shane's own words, it took him to the next level. Shane noticed the mental clarity. Bobby was able to work out longer and gain muscle mass. He's already completely shredded. I gotta admit, for me, the biggest effect has been libido. Now, I've never claimed to have a body like some beach model, but back when I was 20, 22 years old and worked out every day, I looked great. But over the years, and being married, having 3 kids, and working 18 hours a day, I gained basically 100 pounds. And it's been a long process losing that weight in the last 4 years. But if you look at the photos and the videos of what I looked like 4 or 5 years ago versus today, the results are dramatic. I'd already cleaned up my diet, I was working out hard, but I'd only lost about 20 pounds. It was adding the other key ingredients from InfoWarsLife.com that helped me personally go to the next level and shed another 35 pounds.
This has actually made me feel so good that here lately, about a year ago, I started training jiu-jitsu, and that kind of led to doing some boxing and kickboxing. I mean, it's amazing that 2 years ago, I was on the couch and couldn't even tie my shoes, and now I'm training with MMA fighters and just doing stuff that I never thought that I would be doing ever again. So Super Male Vitality has allowed me to do some amazing things, and if it has those kind of effects for me, I know that it will do great things for you. So just try Super Male Vitality. I promise you, you'll love it.
And finally, let's look at Anthony Gucciardi, InfoWars.com reporter. He also works with Dr. Group and others, helping develop the newest, most cutting-edge, high-quality supplements. Let's take a look at what happened when he tried to barefoot ski for the first time with the Steiners. And remember, we're not making fun of him. He had the will to get in the arena, and he's lost more than 10 pounds in the last few years of fat and gained more than 10 pounds of muscle. And Anthony chalks it up to Super Male Vitality as well. Bottom line, folks, you want to discover the power of Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality for yourself by visiting InfoWarsLife.com today or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.
Well, before the break, I talked to you about some revealing telephone calls between Colonel Gaddafi and Tony Blair, in which he said, if you guys take me out, then there is going to be a power vacuum. It's going to lead to a rise in Islamic terrorism, which will eventually spread to Europe. Well, now that prophetic warning is coming true. Islamic migrants are waging jihad on women. And it appears that government officials are also collaborating there in Europe. German officials have reportedly been told to cover up crimes committed by migrants in order to avoid spreading panic among the population. No arrests have been made so far in Cologne following all of those sexual assaults that took place on New Year's Eve. So now it's being reported that there was actually New Year's migrant sex assaults taking place in every major German city on New Year's Eve. So hundreds of these assaults have now been reported to police. A bouncer who was actually working at a nearby hotel during this mass molestation of women revealed how police told him they thought the situation resembled a civil war. And contrary to a lot of the downplayed media reports, senior police officers say that they feared some fatalities were actually going to result from all of the chaos that was going on there in the square there in Cologne. They were lighting off fireworks and crowds of people, and the fireworks were just, being set off in huge crowds. And then so as people would try to run away from these fireworks being set off, groups would surround the women and, of course, sexually assault them. And so these events were downplayed by the German media until scores of women came forward reporting this. And the German ministers, they initially said, there's no evidence that asylum seekers were involved in this violence, but the media's attempt to cover up this widespread rape by migrants in Europe is now beginning to unravel. A police official said that 14 of the 15 sex attackers that he personally apprehended were newly arrived Syrian refugees. They actually had their papers with them. And according to a leaked police report, it claims that one of those that was involved in the attacks told officers, I am Syrian. You have to treat me kindly. Mrs. Merkel invited me. So basically just thumbing their nose to the police officers there, sexually assaulting women, and telling everyone that basically welcomed them, open their country, giving them free welfare and saving them from, their refugee status. and they're just basically thumbing their nose at people. And, you know, as we pointed out before, about 70% of the more than 1 million people that have been invited into Germany have been young men who are of fighting age, meaning why are they not fighting these militants that are taking over their country? Why are they leaving women and children there to be victimized by ISIS? So, you know, that's just one observation there. But the German chancellor, she has even come out and said, you know, we have to just understand that these migrants are just going to be a little bit more criminal than us, and everyone just needs to calm down. But if you need any more proof that there is a concerted effort to cover this up, Germany's largest broadcaster, ZDF, actually apologized for not reporting on these sexual assault attacks. Now, editors of the network's nightly news show confessed to not covering the attacks despite knowing the magnitude and severity of the events. And leaked police documents also confirm that authorities held back on reporting the information to the public as well. And they did that until the media actually broke the story on Monday, which was 4 days after these attacks took place. So the editors there said the news situation was clear enough. It was a mistake of the 7 p.m. show not to at least report the incidents. But here's what's interesting is that the police actually went so far as to issue a New Year's Day statement saying that there was a relaxed atmosphere in the city center. They blatantly lied and said everything was great. It was so relaxed. What a wonderful New Year's Eve celebration we've had here. So they were actively trying to cover this up, and we've reported this before, that they had been covering up the mass amount of sexual assaults and rapes that are going on due to these migrant crisis here. Now, after the only reason that they now issued this apology and then came out and said, oh, okay, you know, you guys are right, some stuff, really bad stuff did actually go down, is because more than 60 complaints were filed by women. And they were also going online and just saying, why isn't anyone talking about this? And just explaining how they were sexually assaulted. So then that was when the state police chief came clean and he said the events were of a new dimension in crime. So he actually comes out. So no, it wasn't a relaxed atmosphere in the city. Some officials that were there were actually fearing that there was going to be a civil war and fatalities. You know, and then he says, you know, it's a new dimension in crime. Now, the mayor of Cologne has actually come under fire. This woman, she actually suggested that women protect themselves from would-be rapists by keeping them at arm's length. This is actually what she came out and said. And she also suggests a code of conduct needs to be created for women and girls. So we've already reported on this before, telling young girls not to wear skirts, not to wear things. Basically, don't ask for it. Don't ask to get raped. And victim blaming here. And, you know, basically, why don't you just go ahead and make the burqa mandatory? Maybe that'll stop them from being raped, right? Then they won't be asking for it. And of course, there is no word here from the mayor on, you know, how to teach migrants not to rape women. So I guess there's going to be a little cultural education there for these people. But that's not it. So we also have the Green Party's Claudia Roth warning citizens against linking the crime to migrants. And then there's another German minister who came out and said, critics of the refugee program are at least as awful as migrant rapists. So if you're going online into these chat rooms and criticizing the migrants here, you are a rapist. I mean, you are an equivalent to a rapist. So they're basically saying that, you know, that criticizing this mass immigration is as bad as sexually assaulting dozens of women in cities across Germany. So it's just basically ludicrous. So, you know, who decided that protecting Islam's image is paramount and it trumps everyone's concerns? Breitbart is actually reporting that the German government's demand that social media giants Google, Facebook, and Twitter remove what it calls anti-migrant hate speech is actually having its first real test in the wake of these attacks in Cologne over New Year's Eve. So they also point out how moderators on the link sharing and discussion site Reddit have already begun deleting dozens of links and comments about immigrant gang violence after these sexual assaults. And this is, of course, and they're saying it's an attempt to clamp down on vileness. And it hasn't gone unnoticed. People are in these chat rooms going, what the heck? Why are you censoring all of my information there? So they're not only actively censoring the names of the people who were arrested. That's under lock and key. It's a huge secret. The police aren't allowed to report. They actually had to issue a statement saying that it was a relaxed atmosphere there in the square, even though they were scared people were actually going to die, and they knew that there was dozens of reports of sexual assault going on. So there's an active cover-up, and it's pretty clear to see what is actually happening here. It is a planned invasion, and they want everybody to just adapt to this new, violent, dangerous society that they have created, and then they will protect you by expanding their surveillance state and their militaristic state powers. So this is all the plan, order out of chaos. We can absolutely see what's going on. And you know what? Until they shut us up here at InfoWars, we're going to continue to shine the light where they do not want it pointed.
Unfortunately, you've grown up hearing voices that incessantly warn of government as nothing more than some separate, sinister entity that's at the root of all our problems.
It's time to stop submitting to this tyranny. It's time to realize that we're being enslaved.
Some of these same voices also do their best to gum up the works. They'll warn that tyranny's always lurking just around the corner.
Tyranny with a capital T.
You should reject these voices.
Everything that's been done with torture, rendition, the NDAA, the Patriot Acts 1 and 2, from day one was focused on the American people, period. That's it. It's always been about erasing the Bill of Rights and Constitution and rolling out NSA spying publicly, saying it's for Al-Qaeda, rolling out torture, saying it's for Al-Qaeda, but it's really for the general public, rolling out total control and the end of any underground free market systems in the name of fighting Al-Qaeda, but really shutting down any type of free commerce. This is all about converting us from a free society to a tyranny with a capital T.
You guys have the exclusive for, which is a product called Deep Cleanse. And why I'm so excited about it is it's a unique formula, almost like the iodine crystals. We have two unique products that nobody in the world has. One of the most amazing ingredients in the world, and it's called shilajit, and it's actually known as blood of the mountain or rock sweat because thousands of years ago, as a matter of fact, this ingredient was only given to the elite of the elite. Thousands of years ago, up in the Himalayan mountains and in Tibet.
And we wanted to put this in stuff for a couple years, but we couldn't get an organic form.
Right. I mean,
so let's explain. I mean, this stuff's so good, we couldn't put it out for years.
Right. So I had to actually, it's kind of like the iodine crystals, finding a source deep in the earth that we could get the cleanest source available. But in Tibet and in Nepal and in the Himalayan mountains, thousands of years ago, they watched these monkeys. And during the summer months, the monkeys would go up into the mountains.
Now you're being racist against monkeys.
And they would pick this black substance from the mountains. And so in Russia, they actually, it grows in Russia in the mountains and in the Himalayas and only in the summer. And shilajit is actually the decomposition of up to 7,000 different medicinal herbs. So it decomposes, all these different herbs decompose in the Himalayan mountains and the volcanic soil up there. And what happens in the summertime...
So it's almost like an oil from...
Yes, it's high in fulvic acid, it's high in humic acid.
Because they're always claiming oil is really from decomposed animals and plants. There is some oil that is based from fossils, but most of it's really abiotic. But so this is a true fossil source? I mean, explain it to me.
It is, it's really the decomposition, like I said, of over 7,000 different medicinal herbs and plants. And with the rocks and the pressure deep in the mountains, it freezes and during the summertime and the pressures build it up.
It oozes out.
It oozes out. So it literally oozes out of the mountain.
It's like rock sap.
It's like rock sap. It's black, and it's highly nutritious. Even in the 1980s, when the Olympic athletes in Russia were accused of being on steroids, they found out that they were actually been given shilajit because it works as an anabolic as well. and it builds muscles. It's a big dose in there. The second big main ingredient in there is a volcanic zeolite concentrate. And what this formula is designed to do, the shilajit and the zeolites have a real strong negative charge. All the metals and chemicals and PCBs and VOCs have positive charges. So these go in, they grab it, and then they safely eliminate it through the body so you can become healthy. I mean, this is an amazing formula. I wish I actually had it, but because this was an exclusive InfoWars Life product, you're the only one in the world that has this formula now. And you know, there is going to be a limited supply available when you sell out because you can only harvest this once a year.
How do people take it? How is it recommended that this be done? Just a daily dose?
Yeah, daily dose. The instructions are on the label. You know, of course, I kind of modify it for each individual. It depends on what your lifestyle is. I mean, honestly, the best thing to do is for you to avoid all these chemicals and toxins in your environment and try to identify them and start slowly reducing them. But personally, I'm going to probably take it every day, every other day, and I'll probably go with about a dropper full to maybe 2 dropper fulls. And I don't expose myself to any chemicals.
InfoWarsLife.com. Please also support our local AM and FM affiliates, support their local sponsors or become a sponsor, and spread the word. Because these aren't just great products. This is how we fund this independent operation. We're not taxpayer funded like MSNBC or NPR, and neither is your local station. So support them, folks. This is a war.
Well, Joel Skousen was on the Alex Jones show today, and he gave a very clear directive for the protesters there in Oregon, the gist of which is basically declare victory and come on home. Now, I thought that Alex offered some really key intel as well for some other things that might be going on behind the scenes. But now the media has been focusing David, on this growing militia aspect of the story. And, you know, of course, they're going to go with that narrative because it really ties into the right-wing radicalism rising in this country. That's what we really need to be worried about. But they're overlooking some other terrorists that are occupying federal buildings.
That's right. That's
our bloated government.
The federal government itself uses violence and intimidation to achieve political means, right?
Right.
That's the true definition of a terrorism. And, of course, there's this article that was on Drudge Report today talking about another sagebrush revolution. The congressman who is from that area, who knows the Hammonds, had some very interesting things to say. And we need to understand what people are really concerned about. And so he really put this into a context. And, of course, there's an even larger context than that. But let's put this in context as this congressman was saying. Let's go with this first clip. He talked about the overzealous bureaucracies and the Congress that does nothing.
I have seen what happens when overzealous bureaucrats and agencies go beyond the law and clamp down on people. I have seen what courts have done. And I have seen the time for Congress to act, and then it has not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And we've seen this over and over again. Right. And of course, what Congress has done, and I've pointed this out many times myself, they've abdicated their responsibility to write the laws to these bureaucracies. So they create a bureaucracy and they basically create them as a fiefdom. They say, you're going to be in charge of this aspect of the country or the economy or activities, and you can pretty much do whatever you wish to do, and they run with that.
Right.
Absolutely run with that.
Well, and we've seen also Harry Reid, you know, respond last year, basically calling these people exercising their constitutional rights terrorists.
Yes. So he wanted to put this in context. He wanted to give them some examples of some of the things that have happened in that community. And part of the context is to understand just how large this county is. He said there's only 7,000 people here, but it is 10 times the size of Rhode Island. He says it's larger than the state of Maryland. And then he had this to say about recent wildfires and their magnitude.
Miller Homestead wildfire in 2012 burned 160,000 acres. Mostly in this county, if not all, 250 square miles, quarter the size of the state of Rhode Island. That was just in 2012. The Berry Point fire that year in Lake County next door burned 93,000 acres. Last summer alone, we burned 799,974 acres across Oregon. That's both forest and high desert. 2012, 3.4 million acres burned in Oregon. There was another fire in Malheur County, the Long Draw Fire in 2012 burned 557,000 acres, 5 times the size of Rhode Island. So 93,000 acres, 557,000 acres, 160,000 acres, all burning. The Hammonds are in prison tonight for setting a backfire that they admit to that burned 139 acres. And they will sit in prison, time served, and time going forward 5 years.
Wow.
Under a law that I would argue was never intended to mete out that kind of punishment.
Absolutely, because that law was passed to talk about terrorism. And as he says in this clip, he says, hey, you know, if you were setting a brush fire in L.A., where you've got tightly packed people, then maybe that was an act of terrorism. It should be addressed like that. But out in this area, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres just in that county that burned, and millions of acres that burned. 3.4 million acres in Oregon statewide in 2012. This is 139 acres.
Right.
Now, to contrast that, I want you to listen to what he says about how the BLM has conducted itself. I would call this the arsony of the BLM. Let's play that clip.
I've given you the size of the acreages that burn naturally. I haven't gotten into the discussion about how these fires are often fought and how the federal government frequently will go on private land and set a fire without permission to back burn. That happens all the time. In fact, in the Berry Point fire down in Lake County, they set fire on private timberland as a back burn while the owners of the property were putting out spot fires down in the canyon. I drove down there afterwards. They're darn lucky to have come out alive. There's nobody sentenced under the Terrorism Act there. Oh, heck no. It's the government. I can tell you a few years back in Harney County, because I went and held a meeting out there right as the fire was being put out, that the fire crews came in, went on private ground, lit a backfire on private ground behind a fence line that then burned out the farmer's fence, the rancher's fence, and burned all the way over and down into a canyon where there was a wetland, which would have been the natural break to stop the fire from the other side. You see, they never needed to burn that land. These things happen in the course of fighting fire. Doesn't mean they're right, but rare is it that somebody ends up 5 years in prison.
And of course, Leanne, what he's pointing out here is that you got a massive wildfire. People are trying to take care of this. Things are going to happen. This is such a minuscule amount of land compared to what the fire was doing. Like we said before, hundreds of thousands of acres are burning. 139 acres got onto their land. But then what does the BLM do? It's not just in these particular cases that the Congressman Walden was talking about. There's been multiple cases where they have destroyed livestock. They've destroyed buildings, not just a fence. A fence is an expensive thing, especially when you got that much fencing there. But they have destroyed private property, the grass, the buildings, the cattle, and refused to compensate people for this.
Right.
And they're not tried under any law. Nothing happens to the employees. They don't even get disciplined at work for doing a bad job, just as we saw with the gold mine that exploded and polluted the Animas River over 3 states and the Navajo Indian Reservation with heavy toxic metal. Nothing has happened to them. They're not accused of being terrorists, and of course they aren't terrorists.
Right.
But they don't even get penalized for their incompetence or their maliciousness, if that's what that was, because there were people that said that was a deliberate attempt to get a super fund there. They were warned in advance that was going to happen. There's a lot with that. But nevertheless, we see this over and over again. So there's one standard for the government. They can do whatever they want to destroy people. But if you do something, you will be labeled as an arsonist and a terrorist and sent for mandatory minimums. He points out, this judge, and we've mentioned this before, said, I cannot in good conscience apply this sentence to them. He's being pressured by the federal government because they want their land. We've pointed that out. And that's the fundamental thing behind this. They want the land of the people who are there, just as we saw at the Bundy Ranch. They're the last people standing. Let's play this last clip real quickly. This is BLM arrogance.
Some of the agencies decided to reinterpret it. And the first thing they tried to do is shut down this kids' running camp because they said, well, too many, maybe more than 20, run down this canyon back up, as they had for many, many years. So they wanted to shut it down. So we had to fight them back, said, no, the law says historical standards. See, the bureaucracy wants to interpret the laws we write in ways they want. That despite the fact we created the first cow-free wilderness in the United States under this law, and said clearly in this law that it would be the responsibility of the government to put up fencing to keep the cows out as part of the agreement, the Bureau of Land Management said, no, we're not going to follow that law. And they told a rancher they had to build a fence. I networked with my Democrat colleague, Mr. DeFazio from Oregon, who was part of writing this law. I said, Peter, you remember that, right? He said, yeah, I didn't like it, but that was the case. BLM still wouldn't listen.
Okay, so we don't have time for that full clip, but what you can hear is that he's saying to his colleague, says, you remember, they were going to pay for the fence, but now they're just ignoring that. That's his frustration, and he goes on for quite some time talking about what he went through to try to get them to obey the law that he wrote. Okay, and that's the furious thing about it, is that they will not obey the law. They will not obey the Constitution. They're there to essentially set up a complete control of people. When you understand that it's not just gun control, okay, it's land control, it's internet control, it's transportation control, it's healthcare control, and they're doing all of this by exceeding their authority. That's the real key to all of this, and that's what we have to take away from this, is that this isn't something that just affects these people in this area. It's very frustrating for this congressman. He got to tears at one point in talking about this.
You could see his
That's the background. We need to understand they're coming for all of these things if we don't understand what's behind this.
Absolutely. And people need to open up their hearts and have a little bit more compassion, even if they don't understand what's going on there in Oregon. Well, thank you, David, so much. Now stick around. We'll have more nightly news right after this.
Brain force is here. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been on this the last few months. You probably noticed I've been more crazed, more focused, less brain fog, more energy, more special reports, and it's because of brain force.
One of the worst things with most energy products is it's not sustainable, right? You're gonna crash, you're gonna feel really bad afterwards. This has a bunch of different antioxidants and compounds and polyphenols.
Everybody's on these drugs to knock their brain out because the brain's so fried.
We kept changing this formula over and over and over again until it became sort of a grand puzzle. For example, the L-theanine inside of it, that is activated by the different compounds in the yerba mate that we put inside of it as well. This just increases the compounds you already have.
This is what you're actually designed to run on.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a car will run on one form of junkie gas, but it runs really good on what it's designed for. You will find Brain Force, Survival Shield X2, and other game-changing products at InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139. Introducing Secret 12, the new InfoWars Life vitamin B12 formulation. Most forms of vitamin B12 are highly processed and synthetic and could not be properly absorbed by the body. That's why for real results, so many are having to turn to painful B12 injections, which are known to have higher absorption rates. Now, InfoWarsLife.com is excited to announce that we can bring you our most bioactive, powerful form of B12 that has been developed with our exclusive perfected process. Secret 12 is a binary of nutramedical grade, bioavailable coenzyme forms of B12, methylcobalamin, the same kind used in B12 injections, and adenosylcobalamin. Secret 12 is simply taken by mouth, right on the tongue, and then swallowed. No needles, no injections. Don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Discover the secret. Secret 12. Secure your revolutionary Secret 12 formula right now at InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139. I'm talking to people in government. They're really waking up. Military's waking up. Police are waking up. A lot of the citizens are waking up. And the system is going to want to run a false flag, in my view, or provocateur us into a shooting war. That's why this isn't the time, I believe, for civil disobedience like what we see. People can do it, but I have my opinion that they don't have all the locals supporting them. They don't have the Hammonds supporting them. You've got obvious provocateur action going on. The same old players. I think the Bundys are good people. But that's another reason that it isn't their ranch they've been on for 140 years. It isn't where they've run everybody out but the last family. It isn't with the Fed saying, we're going to shoot you, you come get your cattle, and then people cross the line in defiance. That was incredibly powerful.
A George Washington moment, in my view, but also extremely dangerous, and shook Harry Reid. He was shaking when he called him terrorist. Then the enemy is going to want to trick people like that with their incredibly good name into things that are strategic disasters. Now, I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes on this, but Joel Skousen, who I really respect, former Marine Corps fighter pilot, Vietnam, best-selling author, researcher, obviously worldaffairsbrief.com editor. I learned that he basically had some of the same views as I did, and I know a lot of people are listening to this now because it's really a no-brainer with the timing of the Obama gun grab and the projection they now have of, armed takeover and all this. Their cause is just, I believe, overall, but it's the optics. And the globalists are just having glee with this now, saying, see, domestic terrorist, Al-Qaeda. Then we'll get into the impeachment. We'll get into Russia. We'll get into everything else with Joel Skousen, worldaffairsbrief.com. Joel, thank you so much for joining us. You just heard my 5-minute breakdown there. Do you agree with that? Disagree? What can you augment? What can you say about the situation unfolding there in Oregon?
Well, I do agree with you, Alex. I think it's very important to understand that the feds are about to make an example of the Bundy group there in Harney County. And so, as I say, I want to suggest, and I think, and hopefully that they'll be seeing this, I want to suggest a way out of this that I think will benefit both sides. Now, I happen to know Ammon Bundy. He's a very fine person. I think it was a misstep to be able to go into an armed occupation of this wildlife refuge just because of, just like you said, it's one thing to be defending your own property against an armed intrusion by the BLM. That can get public support. But when you're trying to undo a national wildlife refuge, which is a matter of legislative import and needs, and the public expects that to go through Congress, you're not going to win that battle. And now I've seen on bundyranch.blogspot.com the detailed evidence of all of the injustices the ranchers, not just the Hammonds, had suffered when the Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM went to strangle these ranchers, cut off their water supplies, cut off their access to the ranch when roads ran through the wildlife refuge. They have a long litany.
Setting them up for controlled burns, they let everybody else do.
That's right, and didn't prosecute themselves, their own agents, for damaging property, but prosecute people when it gets out of control. Worse yet, in the Hammonds case, they had to, in order to invoke the terrorism statute, they had to rule these accidental burns as arson. And in order to do that, they got a mentally unstable grandson of the Hammonds I think this is just the prosecutors going after an individual who was only 11 years old at the time, got him to say that the burning of the 2006 fire was done as an arson to cover up for hunting deer on federal land. This is important because it's the only one they could pin the charge of arson on. It turns out to be bogus. Not only was the witness, even by the judge's admission, not competent to testify of that 5 years after the fact, he wasn't mentally competent. The point is, it defies all description. I mean, the only thing you need to cover up a hunting piece of poaching on federal property is remove the carcass, which every poacher does. You can't burn a carcass by starting a fire. You can't even burn the entrails by starting
It's ridiculous for anybody that knows. It's like saying that the Bundys were stealing land when they had grazing rights since the 1870s. They play on the public's ignorance of common law and of state law and federal law.
So there are a lot of injustices that have justified the Bundys who have been tracking all of the other ranchers who have suffered at this. And so basically, they made a tactical mistake by saying we want to undo the wildlife refuge. That can't be done. So what I suggest that Ammon does is, before any armed confrontation, before they seal off and start a siege, that he take the high ground, take advantage of the fact that the media has already given some fairly favorable press coverage to the fact that there's no crazies running around. They're cleaning up the place. They're taking care of it. They're not ramsacking it. In other words, there's been some positive press coverage, even from the liberal media in Oregon. They got to take advantage of that, say, we're going to stand down voluntarily because, one, we've already got a sufficient amount of positive press for the Western lands movement here. And number two, that it's very important to realize that the ranchers have been, and their rights have been violated. And what they need to say is, we want to demand a rancher's Bill of Rights be created in Congress. This is similar to the Pilot's Bill of Rights when the FAA was running roughshod over pilots and had control of the judicial machinery that prosecuted pilots. And they forced, through Congress, they forced the FAA to set up a standard of due process. And I think that's what ranchers need, so that water rights cannot be taken away, that grazing rights cannot be diminished arbitrarily by the BLM. If they were to come out with a proposal like this saying, this is what we want, and then stand down, they would have the high ground. People would say, yeah, they're not a bunch of crazies. This would accrue to their benefit.
Well, Joel, this is exactly what I said days ago, and I'm sure we both independently came up with the same idea because it's just common sense. Exactly. I like the Bundys. They're walking into a trap, and then instantly I come out Sunday and I say, look out for federal infiltrators. I mean, they're going to show up like flies on you-know-what, and be careful about people calling for violence. Look out. The Bundys are good people. I understand the government's in the wrong. They're the ones running around armed seizing things. Under the Declaration of Independence, I get that you could say they're in the right, but this is stepping into a trap in my informed view. I mean, I've shown I'm not stupid either. It's common sense, really. And then sure enough, Joe Biggs gets there Monday, and prominent people that are running things run up and yell at him, how dare you say we're feds by name and the Bundys are feds? And then he said, we never said that. Alex never said that. They go, well, it doesn't matter. You know, blah. With people in there telling them lies to then cut them off from people that would support them. This is classic that I've seen in 21 years, dealing with militias, dealing with standoffs, being inside standoffs, trying to negotiate an end to them, like the case with the Gray case. And then the feds come in, tell them bull, and then it comes out it was feds doing it. I mean, it's just crazy. And we have evidence already that I don't even want to give attention to because it just adds to the whole thing, you know, from who the FBI was there with, who they're running. I mean, we have it all. And it's just so, I mean, on video. And it's just so terrible. And then once people have been told you're talking bad about them, in this weird fake kinship thing the federal handlers will engage in, these are expert psychological warfare people, then even though it's not true that I didn't talk bad about the Bundys, it doesn't matter because now we better not talk to Alex because he doesn't like us. When I like him, I'm here talking to him like a straight man does. You know, just straight to him, straight talk, straight shooting. It's just so sad that the liberty movement is not more sophisticated, Joel.
Well, you know, I completely agree. Anyone who's in a situation like Ammon Bundy and his group has got to realize that when you have an open invitation for everybody to come and join us, you're going to have federal agent provocateurs coming in there. And one of those people is probably going to take a pot shot at law enforcement if they get nearby. And then law enforcement will have an example to start shooting. So it's very important to stand down while this thing is peaceful, while you've got the high ground, Ammon, so that you can continue. And I would say, to state the tough position they're taking, that in the future, we will come to the defense of any rancher who is being persecuted by the BLM. But we'll do it in a peaceful manner. We will be armed, but we will come there to keep these kinds of people from being railroaded into prison as the Hammonds were. It's unfortunate the Hammonds succumbed to the latest threats. They really were put through the ringer in a very phony court situation where there was jury tampering, where there's threats, and the poor judge tried to savage his conscience. I know he was under pressure by the feds to throw this terrorism statute. He tried to give less than the minimum sentence and then got overturned. I think he's rolling in his retirement from sadness of what he did, but that's what happens in judges. There's so many controlled judges who are afraid to stand up to the federal government.
Well, that's it for the show tonight. We will see you guys here again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central.
Knockout is back. If you want a product that has 10 known ingredients that naturally get your body to relax, your brain to relax, so you get deep, restful sleep, Knockout's it. InfoWarsLife.com. L-theanine, hops flower extract, lemon balm extract, valerian root extract, chamomile flower extract, L-tryptophan extract, melatonin, and more. All organic, all the natural sources. It's the same price as leading brands of melatonin that are 3 milligrams a piece. It has 3 milligrams, the standard recommended dose for an adult. It's got the GABA, So it would probably cost $50 to take all this as separate pills. It's $19.95. You take one or two of these, and it just is really clean, restful sleep is what the reviews are. It's what I've experienced. And it just synergistically puts everything in there.
InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com. Or call 888-253-3139.
You are watching the InfoWars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. And your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.